everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new or a returning viewer and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. And don't forget to hit the little bell right next to the subscribe button, otherwise you won't get notified when I upload new content. As you may have noticed, last week I didn't upload a new video, and there was a couple reasons for that. One of them was I was undergoing some health issues, which made it really difficult for me to make a video. And the second thing was that there was an attack down in South Florida at Majory, Stoneman Douglas High School, and to be honest, that hit pretty close to home, being a member of the LGBTQ community here in Orlando, and working at a gay club the night of Pulse. And this video isn't going to be about that, but I do want to mention that there is now an official Majory Stoneman Douglas website where you can go and buy apparel to support the kids. It is msdstrong.us, and I'm going to put a link to it in the info below. Now for this week, I wanted to do a Q&A video. And this may be 2 videos, so look for part 2 next week. But I didn't want to make the ordinary Q&A like I've done in the past. And one of the things that occurred to me was that oftentimes I get questions, but I think people sort of edit themselves when they ask me things. And for various reasons, they don't want to hurt my feelings, or they don't want to seem offensive in any way. And I appreciate that, but I don't want that to ever get in the way of things. I want people to be real and honest, because I think that's the only way you can get to the root of things. So I decided to be a little sneaky, and what I did was I asked some lesbian friends of mine to go and ask their lesbian friends questions they have of transgender people, and trans women in particular. And that they did, and some of the questions were things I've never really heard of, and I'm not sure I would have ever been asked. So without further ado, let's get right to them. And the first question comes from somebody named Tabby, who asked, what is one thing that society consistently gets wrong about transgender people? Wow, I mean, I could probably do an entire video just on this question. And looking ahead through the other questions, I think that's true of all of them. But if I were to pick one thing, it's probably that we transition from one gender to the other. In point of fact, our gender always is and has remained the same. Yes, society saw me as that previous gender. In other words, I look like a boy, people treated me like a boy, they try to raise me like a boy. Inside, I was a woman before and I am a woman now. It took me a while to come to that realization and to accept it. In fact, it took many, many years for me to do that. But I think as a society, we are caught up in the physical, when in actuality what is going on is that we're revealing our true selves to you. And because you couldn't see it, very often you don't accept us as that. And yeah, I think that's something of a cisgender bias. Because you're so comfortable in your bodies and you identify so strongly with your biological sexes and your genders, I think it's hard for you to decouple them and accept an existence where your gender identity and your biological sex do not match and have never matched. And also that your body doesn't determine who you are. This is what determines who you are. It always has, it always will. Now the second question she had was, how can allies help the most with awareness and acceptance? Well, don't be afraid to speak up. I think it's very important. When you hear things that are transphobic, don't just let them slide, because your silence is basically acceptance. Yes, it takes a lot of courage, but speak up and tell them that it's not cool. Now Tracy had a couple sex questions. Yeah, I know where your mind is, Tracy. And the first thing is, are there any limitations with sex post-op? And you know what, that's a pretty important question, because I think a lot of lesbians are very hesitant to be in relationships with transgender lesbians. And one of them is a little bit of hesitancy about sex. Is it going to be different? Is there going to be anything that I have to keep in mind? And the answer to that, fortunately, is not really. We have the same parts. We have a clitoris, we have a vagina, we have a labia. There are a couple things to keep in mind, but there aren't things that you wouldn't experience with some other cisgender women. One of them is that lubrication can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. Some of us lubricate a little bit better than others. But you know what? Lube wasn't invented for transgender women, so there are a lot of people out there who need a little bit of help. The other thing is that our vaginas aren't quite as stretchy, so you're not going to be able to fit an entire fist inside there. So you might be a little more limited in terms of the size of the sex toys you use. Second question she had was, during transition, was sex difficult? I'm going to assume you mean before I had surgery. And I can only speak for myself, because I know that some transgender women, when they've been on estrogen, they can't really have sex in a traditional way at all. It's like chemically castrating yourself, and you just really can't get it up after a while. Which goes to show how much we want it, because to an average guy, that'd be like death. But for many of us, it's actually a relief. However, that doesn't say we can't orgasm, and I did have plenty of orgasms during that time. Now, they were all self-induced, because I would say getting sex during that time period with a cisgender woman or a lesbian was actually kind of difficult. Once you transition far enough along where you look like an ordinary woman, a lot of cisgender women are not going to want to have sex with you. And yeah, there are not as many lesbians who'd be open to that kind of experience either. And I think a lot of that has to do with misconceptions. They feel that because we still have a penis, we're still going to want to use it. And in my experience speaking with other trans women, for the vast majority of us, that is not the case. A lot of us don't even want to think about it, or that it's even there. The only times I was intimate at all during my transition, and they'd only happened twice. The first time was with another pre-op transgender woman, and the second time was with a bi-curious cisgender woman. What I mean by bi-curious is that she had been with men her entire time, she'd never been with a woman, and she chose me. And we had sex a few times, and we had penetrative sex once, and only once. I was only a couple months away from my surgery at that time, and I kind of wanted to say goodbye. And while I was doing it, I remember thinking, wow, I really hate this. I was really not sad to see it go. And then the other times we had sex after that, it was all touching and fingers and rubbing and all the things I've expected of having sex with lesbians after my surgery. Shannon asks, how do you react to people who refuse to accept your lifestyle? Well, Shannon, the first thing I'm gonna do is dissect your question. And specifically the word lifestyle. That word drives me insane. Being LGBTQ is not a lifestyle. Being a vegetarian is a lifestyle. Being a workaholic is a lifestyle. Being a health nut is a lifestyle. Being lesbian or being transgender, it is not. It is an identity. It is who we are. And how do I react? Well, I started a YouTube channel. And through my channel, I try to educate people, and hopefully they learn something and grow to accept transgender people. And for that matter, lesbians as well, because I'm just as much a lesbian as I am a transgender woman. And if they refuse to learn, all I can do is move on. The next question is from Wendy, and is a perfect example of the kind of thing that somebody would never ask me straight to my face. Do you feel the same way all women feel? That other women make women feel out of place, unattractive, fat, ugly, etc. And do I get that it's hard being a woman, period? By far, this is the one question that I thought of the most over the last week. There's so many assumptions in it that it's multi-layered. Partly because there's a little bit of an underlying question of whether I'm really a woman now. Do I feel the same things every other woman feels? And while I can partly understand that point of view, my other question is, why wouldn't I? I think there's another assumption underneath that because I was socialized as a guy, that I feel great about myself, that I feel great about my body, that everything is tremendous. Because I think women feel that men don't have the same kind of hang-ups and issues about their bodies that women do. And I think the number of testosterone enhancing and penis enhancing commercials out there alone should be an answer to that question. And I think I could make a pretty strong case that for transgender women, the way we compare our bodies to women can be an even worse experience than it is for cisgender women. Because when you think about it, before our transitions, we did look at cisgender women's bodies with envy. We wanted that. We wanted that very, very badly. But it wasn't simply a case of, I wish I was a little taller, I wish I was a little thinner, I wish I had boobs like that girl. It's more like, I have this guy's body and I hate everything about it. And for a lot of us, it's a huge discouragement to come to deal with our gender identity. It seems hopeless that we'll ever be able to take this biologically male body and make it into anything that looks anything like that cisgender woman's body that we see walking down the block. Any cisgender woman's body. That thinner waist, the broader hips, the breasts, the height. And after transition, it's just as bad. I look at these women, and I happen to have some friends who are some of the most beautiful women probably in Orlando. They're very close friends, and they're dancers. And every week they get up on stage and they're worshipped for their beauty. And I sit back there and yeah, I feel like a schlub. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm even the same species as them. I know that I could lose all the weight in the world and I will never look like that. I will never have a body like that. And to be honest, yeah, it makes me feel worse about myself. It makes me feel bad about me. It makes me feel bad about my body. And that's really hard to admit, but it's the truth. So yeah, I get that it's really, really hard to be a woman. Your question actually reminded me of something my mom used to say to me in the beginning of my transition that really, really hurt. She used to spend a lot of time telling me how horrible it was to be a woman. She would list all the things out, like the way men treat you and the way you're judged. And her assumptions in this question kind of have a root in this common idea. Like transgender women make a list. We think to ourselves, oh man, it would be so much fun to be a woman. Maybe I should try that. That would be really cool. I want guys to open doors for me, and I want to be able to get in free on ladies' night, and I want half-price cocktails and clothes that are so much more expensive than guys, and haircuts that cost 10 times as much, and for guys to treat me like shit when I walk into a mechanic shop. Oh wait a minute, those last few things weren't pluses, were they? One day I got so sick of my mom telling me all these things that I said, Mom, if it is so awful being a woman, why don't you just become a man? And she looked at me, she was like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And of course not, because you're a woman. We transition not because we think it's cool or that it's gonna be easier being a woman. We transition because we are women. And while yeah, there are some very hard things to being a woman, I wouldn't want it any other way. So as I suspected, this was way more than I needed for one video. So stay tuned next week for part 2. And on that note, like, share, and subscribe, and see you around the interwebs.